Mr. Bradley Harris. Let me do your introduction here. So if you haven't already noticed, right, not to pick on him, but Bradley is our only male speaker for today. Woo! So if he's nothing else, which he is, he's brave, that's for sure. And when I first met Bradley, I had to give him a hard time because if you're anywhere from the Midwest, you know, and Laura will vouch for this, that as a Purdue University grad, we don't often talk to those who graduated from Indiana University, which is where Bradley graduated from, but I love him anyway. So as we got to know each other, I became very impressed with the work that he was doing around brain science. He is a senior professional in human resources and also a certified brain-based coach through the Neuro Leadership Institute. He combines his formal education experience with his experience in Global 500 and Fortune 1000 companies where he has led the human resources function. Now he leads his own consulting firm focused on workforce restructuring, performance management, talent engagement, executive development, as well as corporate communications. So he's a man of many talents. I'm very excited about his topic today. It's been brought up a few times, right? We want to understand what's really driving this. What's the brain science behind it? So he's going to help to demystify that for us. And I think help you to understand yourself a little bit better, which is the key, or one of the keys for today. So please join me in bringing Bradley up on stage with a warm welcome.
Studying brains is that we've all been sitting too long. Please stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Another thing I've learned about since studying neuroscience is that there are some funny ways we can trick our brains, and I'm going to show you one of them right now, and that is I'm going to put a little energy into your system. I want you to take your fist and hit yourself, not too hard, right here 3 times. 1, 2, 3. All right? Now, you've just convinced your brain that you're slightly under attack, okay? And that has thrown a little bit of hormonal stuff into the blood system, which will soon get to your brain, and you'll be a little more alert for the next few minutes, okay? So you might hear a little bit more of what I'm going to say. So now you can sit. Oh, all right. All right, I'm supposed to talk into this, so. So, you can sit. So my topic is about why the female brain seems to be so good at leadership, okay? Now, I want to say, that Mandy really took a chance on me when she let me talk my way onto this agenda when we first had the meeting. And the reason for that, you might ask, why? You might say, why? And you'd be right. I have a Y chromosome, so that was a big risk. Number 2, even though this is neuroscience, I don't even own a lab coat. Okay, so not really qualified to give this talk. But I have been studying this brain science stuff for a while, and I am convinced that it really is the secret sauce for creating better workplaces, which will make people more productive, which will make organizations more profitable. So I am completely committed to neuroscience and its the method using it to get better workplaces. Now, I want to say that what I'm showing you today is not, I repeat, it is not nurture. There's a lot of talk about the nurture stuff and socialization and culture and that sort of thing. I want to tell you, while that has an impact, this is about nature. This is about the difference between an X and a Y. This is the genetic built-in stuff that women get when they get that extra X, the X I'm missing, okay? The other thing I want to talk about is that I am only talking about averages today. We can all think about those outliers. We can, we talked about masculine toxicity in females a little bit earlier, and that happens, okay? But it's an outlier. It is an extreme outlier. You don't see it that often. I'm talking about averages. I'm comparing the average male and female brain, okay? So the other thing I want to say is, that we have a lot in common. The male and the female brain, they have a lot in common. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of ability. But there is a difference. There's a real difference, and those differences tell us a lot. They inform us a lot, and it does as much to back up what we already know about women in leadership to explain it from a science standpoint. Most of the stuff that I'll be talking about today, you'll already go, oh, I know that. But I'll be showing it to you why it is, where it is in the brain, okay? And really, when you look at this stuff, women do have, the studies that we were looking at earlier, this will just say, here's the reason for it. So before I get into the female advantage, I want to be fair to the men, okay? I do want to say that men do have some real advantages in their in that Y that they carry in their genetic code, and they are spatial reasoning, ballistic coordination, short-term memory, and a slight advantage in math. Okay, so let me go back to spatial reasoning. Let me explain what that is. Spatial reasoning is the ability to take a three-dimensional object and in your mind move it around, see it from all different angles, okay? And men have there's a part of the brain called the inferior parietal lobules. You don't have to write that down. But it's right about here, and they're a little bit bigger in men than in women. And it's an evolutionary thing because men were hunters versus women who were gathering and doing the child care. Women tended to stay closer to the village, if you will, and so they could navigate back to the village by looking at landmarks. Men, if they were out hunting, got too far away to see landmarks, they had to have another way to get home. And so they're better at sorting out the north, south, east, west directions and being able to know where the landscape sits, even though they're moving around. And you still see today, women will tend to use landmarks to navigate when they're in the car, and men will tend to just say, that's north. Now, the interesting thing about that advantage is it shows up in an area of life that it soon will be avoidable. It will be something that women won't have to worry about anymore. But back when you took your driving test, there was probably one part of that test that you found particularly difficult. Parallel parking, that's it. You got it. Thank you. And the data is clear. Men are better at parallel parking than women. And the other thing that's interesting is even though women can take longer to parallel park, their results don't get any better with the additional time they take, okay? But, you know, now we have cars that you just push a button and they park themselves. So that one male advantage just wiped out right there. Okay? Number 2 is ballistic coordination. Ballistic coordination is just the ability to throw stuff, okay? And men can throw stuff better than women. Now, there are some advantages in their bodies. They're taller, they got longer arms, they got bigger muscles, tend to. They can throw farther and harder for other reasons. But in terms of accuracy, that actually comes out of the cerebellum. There are parts of the cerebellum that are more dense in men than in women, and it helps with this very, very involved movement of throwing. You have to coordinate a lot of different body parts and do it just right, and then at the end, you have to find a way not to fall on your face. And men do it better than women. The interesting thing about that is technology took care of that a long time ago with the bow and arrow, right? Because now it wasn't about aiming with the body, you were now aiming with the eye, okay? And so that was a technology solution years ago. Short-term memory. Men have bigger hippocampus, slightly bigger hippocampus. They can hold on to more pieces of data in short-term memory than women can. Now, the average person can hang on to 5 to 7 words. So men tend to be more towards the 7, women tends to be more toward the 5. Now, technology took care of this thing a long time ago. It's called the piece of paper and the pencil. We can write stuff down. So that, you know, it's a nice advantage for a man to have. He can remember a phone number maybe, but, you know, it's not such a big deal. And men have a slight, and I do mean slight, advantage in math, okay? And interesting thing about that, as you move into more egalitarian societies, that gap becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you go to Iceland, women are actually better than men. I don't know why, but so the other thing is that's an advantage, but technology, you know, the pocket calculator and the Excel spreadsheet, it's not such a great thing for men anymore, okay? So what's this advantage that women have? There are a lot of things. This is just the beginning here, but one of the things about women's brains are that they're just better connected, all right? There's a lot more wiring in a woman's brain to connect one side of her brain to the other. For example, she has this big corpus callosum. It's just a bundle of nerves that runs right through the middle of the head. You can see it in red there. And that lets the two halves of her brain work at the same time and communicate back and forth. Men's corpus callosum is smaller, and so they don't have as much stuff going on in terms of communication in their brain. Number 2, it's not a joke, it's true. No, number 2, men have more gray matter in general in their brain. They have more gray matter, and gray matter is the processing, it's the computing parts of the brain. And then you have white matter, and white matter is the part that connects all that stuff together. Women have more white, men have more gray, women have more connecting, men have more processing, okay? So that just means that women have a kind of coordinated way of working with their brains, okay? There's more stuff on at one time, while with men, they tend to have processing going in a more tightly controlled region, and they'll turn that off and then turn this on. So if they have to move stuff around. So what does that really mean from the standpoint of, you know, why is that such a big deal and why is it an advantage? And it's better connected brains do some great things. You've heard of multitasking. You've also probably heard by now it doesn't really exist. What multitasking is the ability to change from one task to another very quickly. Women can switch tasks much more fluidly than men can. The other thing that with this better connected brain is the parts of the brain that do face and name recall in women. It's easier for both those parts to be on at the same time. So when you look at a face, you can recall the name faster. When you look at a name, you can remember the face faster than a man can. And I think in management, being able to remember names and faces is pretty darn useful. The other thing is that women, because they have a bigger frontal cortex and bigger temporal lobes, they have a better long-term memory. And because they have all this extra wiring going on with the communication, their memories are richer. So women are better at remembering events in the proper order versus men. They're also much better at recalling the emotions that came with the events than men are. Now, men tend to suffer from something known as tunnel vision. They're really task-focused. Okay? Now, I will say, if you're an individual contributor, you know, and your job is to design airplane wings all day long, and you're over in your little cubicle and everybody's leaving you alone, that is a really, really great benefit to have that tunnel vision and really focus in, okay? So it's not a bad thing, but women have the ability to pay more attention to the environment, and it makes some sense. Their role was different. You know, if you consider gathering and child care at the same time, you'd better be able to pay attention to the environment, or your kids are going to die, right? So, you know, men just have more trouble switching tasks, okay? And that means in a day's time, they lose more work time to switching, okay, than women do. Poor guys. Women, as you probably know, we talked about vocabulary and that sort of thing. Women are better at language than men. Whoops. Yeah, better at language than men. Why is that? Well, women have, on both sides of their brain, they have language centers. Men just have language centers on the left side. So there just isn't as much place to hang all that language stuff. Therefore, you don't have as many words for table, right? So, you know, one of the tests that they give with intelligence on language is how many synonyms can you come up with for a common item, like how many synonyms of chair or table or whatever, and women can just come up with more synonyms, more things, more words that mean the same thing than men can. So women just, they read better, their speech ability is higher. We talked about their vocabulary is much bigger. There's one area that men are much better at in language than women, and that is verbal analogies. So if I were to, let's say you're doing an IQ test, it would say something like, Earth is to ball as pizza is to blank. And the right answer would be, out of a list of four, might be the word disc. Okay, well, men can do that better than women can. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know what the evolutionary pressure was that would have caused that. But I do, you know, it may be a cool skill to have, but there is a downside to this. I refer to it as SAS, Sports Analogy Syndrome. Okay? And I'm going to tell you a story because stories help you remember things. You'll now remember men have the sports analogy issue. This is a true story, I was in a conference room one day with a boss. The boss's name was Bill, and Bill loved sports analogies. It just came out of his mouth all the time. And he had said for the third time that this new sales process we were introducing, it was all about blocking and tackling. Okay? And then somebody in the room said, well, you know, I think the salespeople are going to have a hard time with this. They're going to hear a lot of negativity from the clients. And Bill said, well, they're going to have to roll with the punches because it's all about blocking and tackling. And one of the ladies in the room, her name was Betty. I love Betty very much, and Betty said, you know, Bill, if someone tackles me, I am not going to roll with the punches. I'm going to call the police. So women have better emotion regulation, and you know, folks, this is a big advantage at work. The women can avoid the angry outbursts that men don't seem to be able to do. There's two reasons for this. One, men have bigger amygdalae. An amygdala is about the size of a nut, a little nut in your. It's in your deep in your brain, and it is the center for fear and anger and aggression. And so, because men's amygdalas are bigger, they can produce more of that. Now, it makes sense. They were the warriors. They were the guys fighting each other all the time, and so they had a bigger capability for anger. Because if you get angry, you're a better fighter than if you're like, hey, everything's cool. So they have these big amygdalas, but women, on top of that, have a bigger ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And that is the part of the brain that controls negative emotions. And so it sits there and tells the lady, you know, that negativity that's just boiled up in your brain, well, it's okay. There are reasons for it. Don't worry about it. And it feeds that information back to the amygdala, and the amygdala can quiet down. Women have a bigger one. They have more control over those feelings of fear and anger and aggression. Okay? And think about the angry outburst and how destructive it is. I mean, this is a big deal. I think a big advantage for women. The angry outburst, one, it's embarrassing as hell because later you go, why did I do that? Number two, it can destroy trust, instill fear in the people that work for you because now they're going, I'm not raising this. I don't know. This guy's unpredictable. It's a real benefit to not be so susceptible to that angry outburst. Women are much, much better at reading faces. And there's a part of the brain called the right frontal insula. You see it in green there. And that's its job, is to interpret the face, you know, all the little wrinkles and movements of the muscle and everything, and particularly looking at the eyes and being able to figure out what's the emotion that person's feeling. Women just do it much better than men, and as a result of that, it's one of the reasons that women show more empathy. You can't be empathetic if you don't understand the other person's emotion, because what is empathy? It is feeling the same way they do, right? Women are more socially competent. You know, basically you put them in a room with a bunch of people, and they're going to meet more of them, and they're going to ask better questions, and they're going to show more interest in them, and all that stuff that is about social competence. They're going to be able to feel if there's tension in the room or humor in the room or whatever, being able to realize what's the social situation. And that's all because women walk around with more oxytocin in their brain. Oxytocin is if you will, the love molecule. It's also called the social molecule. And it does that. You know, if one of you ladies came up and hugged me right now, I'd get a little boost in oxytocin. Now, what's unfair is you'd get a bigger boost than I would because the difference in our brains. But oxytocin is that social molecule, and it really does make women more socially aware and work better socially with others. And look at that last bullet point. Women are more likely to use those contacts to build alliances. Okay, so now all you have to do is take those alliances and ask them for favors, right? And then you've accomplished something. But definitely women have more contacts and they will have more people they consider allies in the workplace than men do. And the last piece to talk about here is a big advantage as well. And women tend to procrastinate a lot less than men do. And the reason for that is women walk around with more dopamine in their brains. And dopamine is the, if you will, the pursuit of happiness molecule. It's the thing that makes us do tasks. It makes us go after goals, all that sort of thing. It's the motivator in our brains. And women just have a bit more than men do. And so they can look at a task and be interested in doing it even though there's not a burning platform around it. While a man is more likely to need some sort of risk or challenge or something like that associated with the task. And so men like to use deadlines to motivate them to get things done, and that, of course, means they have to put them off longer to get there. But it really is true that if you put off a task, there's more risk associated with it, there's more of a challenge associated with it, you will increase your dopamine, and then you get all the other stuff, the cortisol that increases the stress, and the norepinephrine that will increase your attention, and you can get it done. And so that's the reason, you know, in college the women get the term paper done in the first 2 weeks, and the guys get it done in the last 3 days. It works just like that. So on average, men are procrastinators versus women. So this is just to sum up here. And let's just imagine for a minute that I hadn't taken you through this. I just showed up at your door. I said, I'm an HR guru, and I have a way that you can select leaders so that they will be good at multitasking. They'll be able to remember names and faces better. They'll be great at language. Their emotional regulation will be stronger. They'll be better socially. They'll have more empathy, and they won't procrastinate as much. So if I did show up and I said, I've got this, wouldn't you want to know about it? Wouldn't you want to use it to select leaders? Well, all you got to do is look for the 2 X's. All right? So thank you. I want you to know that if you want more women in leadership in your organization, I am your ally, because I will come and explain to the men why that makes sense.
slightly a selfish question. But I think all of this is super fascinating. So I'm wondering if you have any like great book recommendations to like read more about this.
Well, first of all, I want to say I don't have any gender, brain gender books that I would recommend because I don't think they're very good. And here's the reason. I think they're trying to be too even-handed. I think they're trying to say, well, there's the man stuff and here's the woman stuff. And I don't think being even-handed it makes much sense. I think you need to be honest about what's going on here. And in the workplace, the numbers tell us women are better leaders on average. Okay, and it also says bring more women into the organization, your results will be better. Okay, but if you go out and you read the brain books, it's always about let's all love each other and we need to be diverse and all that sort of thing. Okay, now I will say that there are some really good books about neuroscience that touch on gender, and I think they do it in a more fair way and certainly a more interesting way. So one of them is a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. And Robert Sapolsky is the best writer on neuroscience, absolutely. And it's all about stress. And it's a great way to see the workplace. So there's that book. There's another book called The Buddha's Brain. The Buddha's Brain. And that one is much more in the realm of self-help. Not that you need help, but it talks a lot about meditation and exercise and that sort of thing. So another well-written book. So those are the two that I would always have people start with.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
Kimberly Seago from Employers, and I know you mentioned that women are better at regulating their emotions, so I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I can certainly suppress those anger outbursts, but I can cry about anything, and sometimes, particularly when you're having difficult conversations or if you're just sort of, battling the balance between personal and professional and all of that. I'm just hoping that there's some reason that my brain is wired that way and it's not me personally, because I find that piece much harder to regulate. And the look on my boss's face when that happens, like a man, he's like, I don't know, like, let me find the closest woman to come talk to you because I have no idea how to handle this.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that I do have a semi-solution for that. I'll save it for the end, but it's kind of cool, and not very many people know this. But first of all, I want to say that I cry at sad movies, and when my dog dies, I cry, and so I understand. I've cried at work. I'll be the first to admit I've been so upset in a situation that I cried. So, and so I'm sort of got that little bit of that female brain going on in me. But the interesting thing about women crying at work is that for a long time, the thinking was, well, they do that because they can't have the outburst. It was, kind of like, oh, it's the one socially acceptable thing that women can do, and so they get angry or they get whatever, and then they cry, and that's their substitute for angry outbursts. Well, that's not the case at all. That's not what it is. The women have this ability to avoid the angry outburst, but the amygdala is not about sadness. It's about anger, it's about fear, it's about aggression. Sadness is in a different part of the brain, okay? And basically, the better connections in women's brains mean they're more likely to cry because they're more in touch with the sadness. Okay, and it is a evolutionary adaptation for when women were in groups. and this probably goes, crying like this probably goes back even before Homo erectus, so like more than 2.5 million years ago. But it was a social sign that I need help. And so the other women around them would then come in and say, you need help with health care or child care, or is your husband cheating on you? What is it you need, you know? And so it's a social signal, but it's a social signal probably for other women. It doesn't work that well with men, because then they go, what the hell do I do? All right? Now, here's the secret I want to give you. If you're going to go into a situation where you think you might cry, take a bottle of water with you. And the minute you feel that there's a crying coming on, take a great big gulp of the water. All right? And then if you feel like it's going to come on again, take another great big gulp of the water. You can't cry and swallow at the same time. Okay?
Thank you very much. Very practical advice. I appreciate
All right,
it.
I should have put that in the very beginning of my presentation. Thank you.